Hello, and welcome to another live chat. I am very excited about this live chat also because it is about a topic that I've been meaning to cover for a while now. Hey, hello to everybody who's joining. And yeah, so the topic for tonight is how does faith help with grief? And this is a topic that is very important to me because for those of you who don't know, I recently lost my grandfather, and it was a very tough process, especially, losing somebody that close to you for the very first time. I mean, I've lost people in my life, but they weren't like immediate family. They weren't that close. And so losing someone that close to you for the first time is really a very strenuous event because you could be so hit by grief and it can hit you in different stages, which we will talk about later. But tonight I am talking about how does faith impact grief. And my guest for tonight, her name is Julie, and she is a wonderful, dynamic woman who is going to share about her grief experience and how God showed up for her in that experience. So I cannot wait to have this conversation. And if there's like any questions that you have or any like thoughts, comments, feel free to put it in the chat and we will get to them. So yeah, I am very excited about this topic and just ecstatic to be able to talk to somebody who also had their own experience with grief. Yeah, without further ado, I'm gonna bring up Julie and we're gonna start our conversation. Do you mind like sharing a couple of like just fun facts about?
Sure. So my name is Julie Molina. I am the regional director for the Americas for a little TV show called The Chosen. And, fun fact about myself, I love to travel. It is like my number two favorite thing to do in the world, and I have actually been to 37 countries. So that's a fun fact I like to share. I love talking, so you're going to see that a lot during the podcast, and love sharing with others, sharing experiences. It's my heart to be able to empower voices to share, because I think there's so much power in us sharing each other's story and having people really be able to relate to us and to know that we're not alone. And so one of the reasons why I love to chat with you today.
Yes, absolutely. And Julie, I must say, I was captivated by your story, especially because I was watching the Chosen live stream with a good friend of mine, and that connected. And you were just sharing with Jesus and how he showed up during your moment. So, could you like talk about a time where you experienced grief and what that helped you through those moments?
My goodness. I think that there's probably many times that we experienced, or that we should experience grief. A lot of those times we end up trying not to experience it and we end up shoving it in, right? I know that I could give you many examples of me doing that and not really going through it as I should. However, I think the biggest example that I can share of grief was obviously the passing of my mom when I was just 26 years old, which, nowadays it doesn't sound that young, but back then, I mean, it's pretty young to lose your mom, your best friend. Her and I were very close. We had really important relationship, and we were both the co-leaders of the household, if you will. And so losing her at that age definitely would be the biggest grief that I've had to experience in my life, and that still continuing to experience, because here's the thing about grief is that it's not a momentary thing. It is something that you continue to walk through, you continue to experience. I feel like it changes. It's just the way that it's shaped, right? It's shaped differently on Mother's Day than it's shaped on a random, 5th of July, than it's shaped on Christmas, right? Then it's shaped. It never ends. It just takes different shapes over time. And so I think the second part of your question was, what has helped me get through it. And I have to be very honest with you, girl. I really, really sucked at getting through it. I still do. I am one of these people that will prefer. I'm a busybody. I have a lot of things to do. I'm doing a lot all the time. And I prefer to kind of try and shove it down or put it under the rug. But I am learning more and more over the last few years that that's not very, very beneficial to do that. And so, even though my grief is 11 years old from that specific event in my life, I am just now, in the past probably 3 years, really learning how to experience it, how to live in it, how to not shove it down, but allow myself to go through it. That being said, of course, Jesus. Jesus. There's nothing else I can say for how I have gotten through it, and have been able to continue in, my life journey without having my mom here, and knowing that for the rest of my life, every next milestone, if I get married someday, if I have children someday, at none of those things, she's not going to be here for it. And so I think just knowing that Jesus is, no matter what. I mean, the Bible says, either mother or father will abandon you. Jesus, the Holy Spirit, the Father's love will never abandon us. So that was a long answer.
Great answer. And honestly, I resonated with so many things that you said, and especially it's shaped. Like it's shaped differently through different moments. And as you talked about losing, I recently lost my grandfather.
So sorry.
Yeah, I really am just, it's still a lot, and it's like you said, Father's Day felt very different than this past week. You know what I mean? So it's like say about grief and the fact that Jesus is the one that gets us through the grief. And I'm so grateful to have the Holy Spirit in my life and to have Jesus, who is a I can empathize with every emotion that we've ever felt. And that is something that I agree with you. Like I sometimes want to shut it down and be busy and occupy myself with work, kind of a whole bunch of other things. But it's the fact that you have to really sit with those emotions and really let them like just process it. Now in the chat just now, the only way to have grief is to grip it. And that is so true because the more we try to suppress or that those emotions are gonna come back up into the surface in a way not gonna be full,
That's exactly right. And I want to share through something I learned recently, as in literally a couple of nights ago. I was having a conversation about this and about really needing to sit through the emotions and not pass them by, but actually experiencing them. And I'm somebody that has battled depression and anxiety, sometimes very deep depression. And one of the things that this kind ministry leader at my church was mentioning to me, she said, you have to allow yourself to sit in the sadness of the things that you need to grieve. And I was like, I think she could probably immediately see it in my face. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do that. But I didn't say anything. And she said something. She said, and just know that it will not overtake you. Sadness will not bring you back to depression, because I feel claim that I have been healed from that depression for 2 years now. God, Jesus just did an amazing work, and I have been free from that for 2 years. And I realized as she was saying that for those of us that do have depression, and we know how have had depression in the past, and we know how deep and how dark that gets, like that hole, when you're in that hole, it is dark and it feels impossible to get out of. And I realized that sometimes we decide to kind of put a pause on feeling the grief because of the fear that grief will overtake us, that the sadness will overtake us, and we will end up in the pit of that hole all over again. This time frame was a reminder that we will not, because we're sitting with Jesus in it. There's a difference between just throwing yourself head first into sad thoughts and sad feelings and just letting it be and having no one there with you, than when you have the Holy Spirit and you're doing it in a healthy way with Him, alongside Him. The sadness will not overtake us. So we really should have no fear to sit in that pain. It's gonna hurt, but it's gonna hurt regardless. We might as well do it with Jesus, and it will not overtake us because the Holy Spirit will be there with us.
Yes, yes. And speaking of it will not overtake you, this is the Holy Spirit. Because before this happened, I wrote down and really put in the tattoo Isaiah 43, verse 2. Girl, I'm going to read it right now.
Read it.
And when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk in fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not overtake you. It's just so comforting to know, like, God is with you through everything. And I want to encourage, like, all the people who are watching this now, watching this later, that you have to go through this by yourself. And
That's it.
one of the things that really inspired me to, like, bring God into the whole, like, mental health conversation, because He is the difference maker. Jesus is the difference maker when it comes to going through very overwhelming, tough, emotionally Ooh, that was I needed that. I definitely needed that. Thank you.
Love it. I love it.
Yeah. So I did want to ask, like, in terms of like holidays, you mentioned like, Mother's Day for you. I mentioned Father's Day. Like, how do you hold grief and joy in tandem with like special events or holidays? Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah. For me, the two that hit the hardest are Mother's Day and on her birthday. What would have been my mom's birthday. And what I have learned to do is to honor her, in the sense that I obviously think about her. I wish she was here. I honor her memory. I just like to think back on her, I mean, I usually do, but on those days specifically, rather than being, again, sad or depressed about, the day itself. I come to the realization that even while she is not here, I do have a mother figure in my life. My pastora, she lives in Tampa, Florida. Her name is Dara, and is the sweetest, most special spiritual mother in the whole world. And so I, always reach out to her, and I'm like, happy Mother's Day to her. And I have, I'm blessed to have a lot of girlfriends that are amazing mothers as well. So I try to, celebrate them, congratulate them, and remember that it doesn't have to be, again, with that thought of, the day's going to come anyway. It doesn't have to be a terrible day. I can hold space for my emotions while at the same time celebrating what is here, like grieving what is lost, but also celebrating what is here. I know, like the first couple of years, I would just pretend the day didn't exist. And as I went through it, and as I'm like, wait, but it does. And there is a mother figure in my life that I get to celebrate this with, that my mom would have loved to see me interact with my pastora in this way. She would have loved to know that I'm now, a disciple of Jesus, and that pastora has carried me through that process. And so, it's more like the more the merrier, right? And you celebrate both. You can celebrate the grief and joy at the same time, by not focusing on the negative or sadness of the day, but rather, the blessing.
Yes, yes. That is so important what you said about like holding both of those things at the same. I mean, like, help you do dialectics, like both of the things could be true at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's true. Like, you can, like you said, you can grieve her, but at the same time, you can utilize that day and that moment to be able to celebrate with others and to
Mhm.
lift like your mother's memory and her legacy through those interactions. Like I really appreciated like you explaining it like that.
Yeah.
Yes. Speaking of community, you have a lot of people in here that are just supporting you and showering you with. I love it. But like, what role does community play in you managing grief?
My gosh, I think it is one of the biggest roles, aside of course from Jesus and the Holy Spirit, but community is so important because as we're going through a grief, we experience almost I would say like a roller coaster of emotions, right? I mean, you know that like 5 stages of grief and all those things. Those things, what people don't tell you is like you don't just go through the 5 stages and then you're done.
Right.
No, you literally go through them sometimes over and over and over again. And sometimes you go through all five in a month when you're dealing with some, significant grief. I think community is the one that pulls you out of that, and not necessarily that it is their responsibility to do anything about it, because here's the flip side of that coin. From the community perspective, it's not that they are responsible to fix or heal or do for us when we're grieving, but when you have community that understands that all they can do is be with you, be present for you, that is all we can, that's really all that we can ask for during those times. Because there are going to be times when we need a hug and nothing else. There's nothing, as somebody who's lost a mom, there's nothing you can tell me that's going to make that better. There's no words that you can give me that's going to make that pain better. But you can be there for me. You can just be there with me. Community gets a chance to go with you to Chipotle or go get a coffee, get you out of the house, get you thinking about positive things, get you planning a trip. If you're one of my girlfriends that's been on my trips with me, that reminds you that there is so much more to life. Because sometimes I feel like when you are experiencing grief, and depending on which of those stages you're in, it feels all encompassing. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing else. There's nothing else that could possibly matter right now except this grief and this pain. But honestly, that's simply not true. That's a part of the life you're experiencing. But even when, in my case, it was a big, big part of my life. But even then, it was not my full entire life, right? I still had my own dreams. I still have my family to take care of. I still had my trips to take, my job to do, right? I gotta put food on the table. Like there's all these things that still are happening alongside grief. And I think sometimes like community is so important because they remind you of that. They take you out of that, right? They remind you, like I said, you still have your dreams, Julie. You can still let's just go, on a trip. Let's go to the beach. Let's go watch a sunset. Let's do this. Just help us get our mind off of this one thing, and that's all that matters, because it's not. I mean, life encompasses so many different things. And God says, like, where in the Bible, when he says to give thanks in all things, I find it fascinating in Thessalonians when he says that, because even in the middle of grief, you can still give thanks in that. And as somebody who's experienced grief, you can probably imagine when you're sitting in that pain, there is nothing to be grateful. I'm like, what do you want me to give thanks for this pain? What? I do not feel like there's anything to be grateful for. But there is. There always is. And community does that. Community reminds you. Let's go watch a movie. We can be thankful for the movies. Let's go get a coffee. I'm Colombian. I can drink coffee all day long. Let's be thankful for coffee. I think that's the power of community, being able to just be there. And they're not responsible for us, but just being there is so helpful for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. And like grief can feel very overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like you're isolated and it's just like you said, all that you can see. And just having people in your life. And like on the flip side of it, like my friends, like, one of the girl I was saying is like all bad recently. And like wanting to like help her out and like wanting to give advice. But then some got to notice that your presence is more powerful than the advice that you're giving. You just need to sit with them.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, give them a hug or like take them or like something like, but you don't have to always, and people don't know what to say in the moment, they would say like all these euphemisms like, this too shall pass and better days are coming, and yes, there's like always saying the things, but in the moment it feels like it's cheapening the thing that you're experiencing, and
That's right.
yeah,
It
for sure.
feels like, you know what it is? I feel like as Christians, we get in this mode of like Christianese, just like spewing out Christianese because it's the right thing to do, right? Because we do believe in the Bible. Of course, we do believe in the Bible, but we you can't just throw Bible verses around and try to like for that to be a healing balm on something like losing a loved one or something like, and grief, by the way, we're talking about losing loved ones, but grief is not, it doesn't just apply to that. It can apply to so many things. I mean, it can apply to, you know, maybe women, white wives that are married and really wanting to have children and not being able to, like the grief of not being able to have a child. Or what about the grief of the dreams that you have had since you were a little girl and they're now crushed for whatever reason? What about the grief of, if you're in a car accident and your health, you are now paralyzed and you can't walk anymore? You got to grieve through that. Grief takes on, it comes along with so many different life stages. So it's not just about losing a loved one. And I think that sometimes with um our Christian culture, we tend to try to put like little band-aids on top of it. And I like the analogy, my psychologist, I call him my shrink, told me this. It's like when we were to say Romans 8:28, everything happens for a reason, and everything will work out well for those who love God. It's like we're putting a band-aid on a broken arm. That is true. We believe in Romans 8:28, but that really has nothing to do with the grief that I'm experiencing right now. It doesn't actually help me heal what needs to heal. And so I think that that's something to be mindful of. Like you said, on the flip side, how do we support other people? There's just remember, there's really not much that we can say. I feel that's my personal opinion. It's just being there, being present, for them to know that in the middle of the night, if they are going through an anxiety attack, or on Mother's Day, I have a friend who, like, her and I will make plans if possible, if we're both in town on Mother's Day, because she knows, and she also lives, far. She hasn't lost her mom, but she lives far from her, so she will sometimes, reach out to me and be like, what are you doing on Mother's Day? That's it. She's not telling me, anything that has to do with my grief, but she knows that that day is hard for me. And so she wants to go out to lunch or something, right? So it's things like that. We believe that it's true. We believe the Bible is true, but let's be more human in those moments than, the label of Christianese.
Yes, absolutely. And Emma Truck, she said, you don't try to fix people in community. You walk with each other in community, grieve together, celebrate together, everything.
That's right.
Yes, that's the role of community in the grieving points. But even like during the celebration, I feel like we don't celebrate enough.
That's true.
Yeah, we accomplish something and then we move on. Like those moments of kind of you to be able to like hold that grief in tandem with the joyful moments, like we were saying earlier. Like community, estimate community, but it does a lot of good.
It does so much good. I mean, literally, it's biblical. We're not meant to do all of this alone. We're meant to carry each other's burdens and be there for each other in the midst of it. And that, like you said, includes the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did want to get into like more of like God's role in your grief process. What
Mm.
helped you to express God's character instead of like resorting to the very human default that, he is to blame for the bad things that are happening?
Right. That's a really good question. And I have a really simple yet complex answer. I have no idea. Girl, 100% the Holy Spirit. Because here's what happened when I actually came to Christ through my mom's disease. When she got sick and seeing the way my pastora reacted and the way she loved her and the way she would come over all the time, pray for her, be there for her, help her cook, like, so many things. That's what opened my eyes, because prior to her diagnosis and prior to all of this, I mean, I would have called myself like a Saul. Okay. I did not like church, or I did not like church people. I would consider myself agnostic, and I would not want to like interact with church folk. And I'm not gonna lie, I think twice that I went to church, kind of because my mom kind of forced me and guilt tripped me and kind of made me go. Both times I was completely hungover and drunk for the night before. I was not trying to be there. I was just like committing up, doing the checklist thing. And so for me, it was a very radical transformation of like, from Saul to Paul. Like, it was just seeing what happened around my mom through her battle with cancer, that helped me eventually. I had a conversation with Pastora, and the details of it are a really, really long story. I don't want to derail your question, but the point of the matter is I came to Christ in the midst of her disease. And so I was literally 3 months old in the faith when my mom passed. I just remembered something. I want to take back my response. I said, I don't know. It must have been the Holy Spirit, but I actually do know. It was the Holy Spirit, and it was the faithful prayers of my pastor. Because this is what happened. So I came to Christ. I was 3 months new in the faith. I'm a very passionate, loud, go-getter type of person. So I don't half-ass anything. Okay. If I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. And so I was like, okay, I'm really gonna really give Christ a real shot. And I started learning how to pray. I started learning how to read the Bible. I would go to that church like every day. I mean, I really deep dove into faith and trying to rely on him and trying to understand and all of these things, right? That I was in that first love. And so I'm 3 months new into being a Christian in my relationship with Christ, when my mom passes. This is the first part that I remember, which is why I said I don't know, is that the day that she passed, I remember going to the hospital. And by the time I got there, I missed that she had already passed when I got to the hospital. So I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to her in that moment. And I remember walking into the room where her body laid at the time. And I closed the door, like against the door, there was a chair right next to the door. And I closed the door, and I was just her and I. And I literally just fell to my knees on that chair. And I said what I think is the most powerful prayer I have said in my life, which I just said, Lord, I don't know I don't know why you do this. I don't know but what I do know is, as of this moment, my entire life has changed. Everything I expected for my whole future, everything I planned, everything I thought would be, I thought of like, when I have my first child, like, who's going to teach me how to change a diaper? Like, I thought about all these things, and my entire life has just changed before my eyes. And I remember saying, I will accept your will only if you promise, which is silly, right? We can't really put conditions on God, but I was 3 months old. Give me a break. So I go, only if, Lord, you promise me that you will be with me for the rest of my life. You took her, now I need you to be with me and never let me go for the rest of my life. I can only do this with you. I can only do this if you're by my side. Otherwise, I can't. I just can't. In retrospect, I always say that was the most important prayer I've ever prayed in my life, because he has kept that promise. From that moment and that sure, he has never let me go, no matter how much I have been upset, mad, no matter how much I have sinned, no matter how much I have anything. From that moment, he has never let me go. But the second answer that I said about prayers is because that's what was happening in my life in front of me, and what I knew was happening. What I didn't know was happening in the background was that Pastora, God had already revealed to her that my mom would not be healed. So while we were all praying for my mom's healing months prior, she said she was actually praying for me.
Wow.
Because she knew that, having come from the world in which I lived and having made such a drastic change with the hope and the true belief, because we believed it, right? God can heal. I still believe that God can heal. I've seen him do it. He chose not to in that moment, but that's a different story. But I believe he can do it. So I had the belief, and I was praying, we were praying with the belief that he would heal her, and then to get a no. When you're 3 months old in the faith, when you just came to Christ because of this miracle that was going to happen, she's like, my pastora said, I was fearful that you would run so far away from him, even deeper in the other direction than you ever had. And so she was praying for me to maintain my faith and to seek him in the midst of it, because she knew what was coming down the pike. And that, I mean, those are the only two explanations that I can give you. Holy Spirit and the faithful prayers of somebody that knew, that cared, that knew how to pray for me, and that could foresee the possibility of me running in the other direction, and started going to war for me so that wouldn't happen, because there's no other explanation.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Like, you had me almost crying over here.
Sorry, not sorry.
That is so, like, incredible, the way that even as a new Christian to the faith, like, your faith grew in leaps and bounds through that tragedy. And it makes me like think about all the moments where God has been just like refining people in the midst of the fire. And it just gives me like goosebumps, because as you were talking about, like, just God be with me during that moment. I had a similar prayer experience, like when I first got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I was in the hospital after receiving that diagnosis, and
Wow.
God, I'm mad at you right now because I don't know why I got diagnosed with this in the first place, but the rest of my life is going to be different because I have to manage this. But please be with me. Don't leave. And it's just like you saying that just brought me back to that moment. God never leaves us nor forsakes us. And
Never.
that was just like something that rang through my entire life. And I'm so happy that he showed that to you as well, because it is true. His presence is always with us, even when we don't feel it, even when we're mad at him. He's just like, you know what, I can take it. Like, I'm still here. Like, that is just the ultimate comfort to know that God is just through everything. Like, it's amazing.
It really is. It's something I think it's honestly beyond human comprehension.
Yeah, for sure.
Because we're used to conditional love, right? We're used to, once you mess up, you were out. Or once, you say something I don't like, then the friendship's over. Just so much conditional love that is experienced in this world. To even think that his love is so unconditional, unending, unwavering, and that he will be there for us no matter what, always. I mean, sometimes I'm like, I don't even know that I can comprehend it. I'm just thankful for it. But it's really, really special.
Yes, absolutely. And Julie, before we like wrap up really quickly, I do have one more question for you.
Yours.
What would encourage someone who is struggling to manage their grief? Like, what would that encouragement be?
Oof. I would say bring it to Jesus in whatever shape it is in today.
Mm.
If that is anger, bring it to Jesus in anger. He is not, what you said very well, he is not afraid of our emotions. He's not afraid of our anger. He's not afraid of whatever it is that we have to say, that we feel that we need to all get it all cleaned up before we go and talk to him about it. Don't wait. Don't wait even 1 second. Bring it to him exactly in the shape that it is today. If it is, just absolute anger, then yell at him. Like, yell at him if you need to, be like, God, why? Or whatever you feel. For me, I've never felt the need to ask why, but I know that a lot of people do. But whatever the question is, whether it is why, whether it is I am mad at you, whether it is how dare you, anything that comes to mind, bring it to Jesus, because he is the only one that can actually ever do anything with it. And he's not afraid of what that looks like. And I think that I would say obviously that's the first step, and the second step is do seek that community. We talked about the importance of community around us to help us get through these things. And what really stinks is that when we are in grief, that can lead to depression, and it can lead to just darkness and sadness. We actually do the opposite. We isolate, right? I think for most people, it's a human behavior or human desire to isolate. Fight that urge, because you know what? That's actually, when I say human desire, I'm going to actually change that terminology to say that's fleshly desire. Your spirit doesn't desire to isolate, because your spirit was meant to be in communion. Your spirit was meant to be with Jesus and with others. We see that in Genesis. It is not good for man to be alone. And when God said about Adam, it's not good for man to be alone, he was with him. His presence was always there. His presence was always there. So when he was saying alone, he wasn't talking about 100% alone, because Jesus, the Holy Spirit of the Lord, it says that he just walked around, right? So when he said that about Adam, he was actually referring to other humans. His presence was already there. That was the very first companion that he had. His presence was there at all times. And then he still said it's not good for man to be alone. And so it's, we are meant to be with God first, just like in the Garden of Eden, and then with others second. So fight and resist, because isolation is not what your spirit wants. It's not what your spirit needs. That's just what your flesh wants. Because you know what? The enemy wants to use that isolation. The enemy wants to literally put you in a place where you are experiencing so much sadness and you're so alone and you're so all these things that you're literally incapable of seeing the goodness of God, of seeing the goodness of that coffee with a friend that I was mentioning earlier, right? But that goodness still exists. So resist the temptation of walking through the grief alone, because Jesus offers himself to you. And what he experienced grief, his dad died, right? Like he experienced not only that, but obviously every other pain that we can think of that he experienced. He knows.
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit is our counselor. He is our companion. What does that mean? That means that he's there for us in the moments. So seek him and seek others. And even if, like we said, sometimes community, it's hard for people to know how to sit in this with you. Tell them. You're like, well, that's not helpful. Let's just go get a coffee and not talk about it. Let's tell them, right? Because one of the beauties of grief, I will say this, is that because we have been through it in this way, we can now be there for others in that way. And we can now we know what is and isn't helpful, and we can be that for other people in the midst of it. And so, seek people that maybe understand you, and just resist the temptation of going through it alone. That's my number one advice.
Yeah. Wow, you just dropped some gems, like, so blessed by read a couple of the comments because that was blowing up from this. But okay. So Arlette was like, this, whatever shape it is in today. And she also said, I think for me, also not I, but it's I accept it, but you have to help and me. That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Wait, isolation is the enemy's greatest tactic. We got Sam, that's my sister. Okay, so exactly, that's God, because he didn't want Adam to be in isolation and to be alone.
That's right.
And Marilette was like, it's the only in the armor as believers. And yeah, that was like some of the highlights from the comment.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Marilette. Thank you, Sam, for being on and commenting as well.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Emma, too. She was dropping some gems too. Thank you so much.
Love it.
All for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your story, being vulnerable, and just bless on this live chat. And everyone, I hope that you stay tuned for more live chats and everything else. Rough Edges. And check out Julie's page too. She is doing phenomenal things.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for opening a space for really vulnerable conversations that need to be had, and to just being open to sharing your story as well with grief. And, I pray that this conversation can bless you and can bless the people that are watching it even after it's live. And so thank you for opening that space.
Yes, of course. All right, good night, everyone. Good night, Jeffrey.
Good night.